of the holy war, the Jihad.
Yes, that is a struggle for righteousness. For example, Britain, when she was under attack by Hitler, what you did was jihad. And we take our hat to you, to Winston Churchill, for, putting the spirit into your people. Now that is what is a defensive war. And you had to retaliate. Because if you didn't, if you just sat back, keeping Hitler at bay, it wouldn't have served the purpose. You have to attack. And in the state of nature, everyone has a right to do that. So Islam allows us to defend ourselves and to extend our hostilities to a reasonable amount of satisfaction and retaliation.
All right, can I come back to Hans Eysenck, and perhaps you'd like to develop it a little further, because we've actually heard an exchange between the two of you, but would you like to come out on a little bit further about perhaps other religions and not only about Islam?
Well, it's not so much a particular religion, because within each religion you have all sorts of different gods. As I was trying to say, that of Torquemada and that of Francis of Assisi are all Christian. Gods are entirely different. So man creates God in his own image, even within a given religion, and certainly between different religions. The God he needs will be a different God according to his own personal requirements and to the kind of society in which he lives. Our society is different to that of the time of the Crusades, and consequently we need a different kind of God.
Can I ask you then about the role of conscience, and where does conscience come from?
Well, psychological experiments on conscience have shown pretty conclusively that you can manipulate it and create it through a process of social learning, Pavlovian conditioning, and so on. It is something that is acquired through social influences, although there is also a strong genetic factor in it. In other words, altruism, the tendency to do good to others, is certainly, to some extent at least, genetically controlled, in the sense that if you look at identical and fraternal twins, there's a much higher correlation within the identical than within the fraternal groups. And the same is true of religion. I think that's a very important point,
Professor
that religious beliefs are in fact genetically controlled.
Professor Eyre, where do you think conscience comes from?
I entirely agree with the last speaker.
I have no quarrel with that at all. Anybody in the general audience? Yes, in the front row.
I'd like to throw out a definition that might be helpful to some people of the difference between religion and Christianity, because there's a distinct difference. Religion is largely man, by his own efforts, some of which have been demonstrated tonight, in terms of mental gymnastics, trying to get to God and looking at the most powerful thing, like the sun, and bowing to that. Christianity is God coming for man. And I was interested in Herman Bondi's remark that he's an anti-revelationist. If there's a God at all, there's no way we can know anything about him by guesswork, only that he should reveal himself to us, which he did in the person of Jesus Christ and became human.
But where does conscience come from?
Conscience is given to us by God, and we are in the process of numbing it and pushing it down to suit our own purposes and interests, which is called selfishness.
Other people in the audience, where does where does the conscience, where's the idea of conscience come from? Yes.
I would say the conscience comes from the human soul. It's the human soul speaking out and crying out for release.
Okay, it's not just fear. Do you not think that it's an animal fear, a fear of being found out? Yes, Daniel Rubinstein.
I tend to think it's a sort of fear of alienation, really, being cut off from the rest of the community. And I think perhaps that, for instance, that Live Aid event demonstrated a huge sense of community.
Everybody wanting to join
yes,
in. Herman Bondi, would you share that?
Well, I certainly feel that we are basically herd animals, and that all herd animals must have feelings like conscience.
Hugh Montfort, what do you feel?
Well, I don't think conscience is to be equated with either wish fulfillment or going with the herd, because my conscience often forces me to stand out from the herd. I think it is the God-given means by which I have to act responsibly. And I think that is how it's evolved is something for the I don't understand it in animals. I look to the scientist, I look to the psychiatrist to see how it functions with the ego, the superego. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what it actually is. I think it's the God-given faculty by which we can behave responsibly, and it's not to be equated with things like utility or welfare or wish fulfillment or anything like that.
I must protest against this assumption certain faculties are God-given as opposed to others. I disagreed, for example, with the physician when he talked about love. Indeed, I mean, love is a human emotion, but there's no particular reason to single that out as trying to the existence of a supernatural being, any more than the other human emotion. I mean, all human emotions are to be accounted for in the same sort of terms, in the kind of terms Professor Eysenck or one of his colleagues would account for them. And just to single out love is quite arbitrary. I mean, the assumption is that we are naturally egotistic, predatory, and so on, and that only because of some supernatural agency do we behave decently to one another. This is absolutely contrary to the facts. We have, in fact, as even David Hume pointed out, principle of sympathy, innate principle of sympathy, as well as an innate principle of egoism. And one no more needs a divine explanation than the other.
William Houghton.
Look, let's get this straight. There is no reason on earth why we shouldn't go around acting like perfect pigs to all and sundry. There is no big Monty Python foot poised to come and squash us if we act badly. Yet, a lot of us do act well towards our fellow man.
But why should we not? That was just the point that I was making.
Because
I was just protesting against your assumption that it's somehow natural for us to want to be decent to one another and unnatural to be decent to one another. What possible ground have you for that assumption?
In this world today, my experience is that it strikes me that more people are being unreasonable to each other than are being reasonable.
Well, in that case, you should be Manichaean and believe in the devil.
Come on,
if you're taking your deity as accounting for human attitudes, that's the way you should go. Well, totally illogical.
But Professor Eyre, all other species are selfish, basically, aren't they?
No,
No,
by no means.
by no means. Go ahead.
Herman Bondi.
But I wasn't saying that our being herd animals means that everybody has to move with the herd. What I do mean to say that we are not solitary beings. We've got to have the faculty, as other animals live together, to get on in some fashion with each other.
Tina Mehta.
You just mentioned the devil with great aplomb, but the devil's best trick is to make man believe he does not exist, and I think that's what the problem is, that, you know, we are in a state of chaos suddenly instead of harmony. And it is the state of harmony that we are trying to create in this world, and not distort the minds of children by showing them violence and explaining that that violence is necessary to bring about harmony.
Mahua Krishnamurti.
I agree.
Hinduism clearly says, what is God? Answer to our dear friend's question. God is truth, God is love, and God is good. Whatever name you call, it is God. Why allergy to the name God? Love, beauty is God.
So you don't actually feel that he's supernatural, that God is supernatural. Hugh Montefiore, what do you feel about that?
Well, I do think that God discloses himself in the smallest particle of matter, and in our human relationships, and in love is to me a window into God. But I do think that he has supernaturally disclosed himself to us. That's why I'm a Christian, because I believe that he has been incarnate, as you said. That's what Christians believed. I believe God was incarnate and suffered the worst that people could do to him. And this is, to me, the only way I can see my way through the problem of evil.
Can I just remind people, and perhaps Hugh Montefiore in particular, of Einstein's concept of God, which was, yes, God who made the universe in wonderful ways, but had not the slightest interest in us human beings, and was a totally impersonal thing that couldn't possibly care for our prayers.
I want to talk to a psychologist next, Leslie Francis.
I would like to go back to the question you keep asking. Did God create man, or did man create God? And I see that as a deceptively simple kind of language used. They're two completely different order